Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Whatever Show. I am Lawrence Winterman. Dana Dubois is on a secret mission right now to,
On assignment.
yeah, she's on assignment. She's on assignment. I don't know what she's trying to do, man. Something so top secret, I don't even know about it. But I'm joined by the one and only Marlon Weems. Marlon, how you doing?
I'm good, man. As Obama would say, fired up and ready to go.
All right. I love it. I love it. God, I miss those days. Fired up and ready to go.
Good
Can
time.
we yeah, good times, good times. One day we'll get that back somehow, some way. Maybe sooner than later if Trump decides he's going to run for a third term. We're going to do a draft.
Listen, man, I keep saying if Obama comes out and says that's a great idea, me too, they will go crazy. They will lose their freaking minds.
Right. Right. They literally would lose their minds because on the one hand, they'd want to allow Trump to do it. And on the other hand, they would desperately search for some reason that Obama couldn't.
I know, right? It would be like match of the century, Foreman Ali. Well, no, he's not that good. Trump ain't that.
Well, something, but yeah, with all of American democracy and the stability of the Western world on the line.
Oh, yeah.
Man, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. The weather's a little, a little funky, a little cloudy, rainy, but okay, better than a hurricane.
Oh my God, better than a hurricane. Like we, yeah, everyone should be praying for the folks of Jamaica right now. And I think
Yeah.
it's crossing Cuba or crossed Cuba last night. Like it's just really, really bad. Sorry.
No, coffee, coffee time.
Time for a sip of coffee. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not much of a morning person, Marlon, so I haven't really checked all the news and everything. I don't know if we've seen pictures from Jamaica yet, but I'm imagining, it was a Cat 5, 185 mile per hour sustained winds. Like,
Yeah, that's, it's going to be bad. I mean, living on an island on the East Coast, I always, this, we enjoyed the summer, but we also kind of have a little bit of dread because we know just depending on a right turn it can come up the coast, and so you almost feel bad being happy that it missed us.
yeah,
Because it's not good.
yeah, no, it's, this one was really, really bad. And, I mean, we've been talking for years about climate change and the impacts it's going to have. It was a weirdly quiet hurricane season so far. But
Hmm.
part of what that meant is there was all that really hot, undisturbed surface water in the Caribbean that was just hurricane fuel.
Looking for a place to go.
Yeah.
I saw something a few days ago to just underscore how bad how bad climate change is. In Iceland, they had mosquitoes for the first time ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Dana picked that
That's
as her
just,
fucked up
come
Friday
on.
story this past week that like a place that had never had mosquitoes before in human history now has mosquitoes because we have warmed the globe up that much.
Yeah. This hoax is really something, isn't it?
Yeah. For a hoax, it's
For a
really
hoax,
well
it's got a whole lot of
executed.
evidence.
Yeah. My God. My God. Well, man, I'm so excited to have you here. You've got big shoes to fill with Dana being gone, but
I know.
I know that you can do it. Um,
I'm nervous.
no, you're not. No, you're not. Uh, so I thought we should talk about something light and easy, like how it's time in this country to talk about reparations. Um, because here on the Daily Whatever Show, we like to keep things light.
Yeah, no pressure. That's I appreciate that. Just kind of a stress-free conversation.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, Here's the thing, man. I feel like there are people who would look at this and they'd say like, this is not the time to talk about reparations. We've got to save American democracy and blah blah blah. But my personal feeling is the reason we're in the place that we're in right now is we've avoided talking about the hard things in this country for a very long time. And, you know, I have kind of come to believe that Um, if we aren't talking about hard things, which means trauma and past trauma and generational trauma and racial trauma, like the trauma that is carried by a nation and people, um, that we're never going to do better than what we've done here, and we can see how badly things have gone off the rails here.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
um,
That's a great point. One of the things that has always been interesting to me about um, Republicans is how they um, embrace, the Confederacy, and we can't ignore our history, and we can't take these statues down, and we can't, change the names of these Air Force bases. But we also can't talk about what those people did either.
right.
It's a really strange kind of, way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it's we're talking about traitors, we're like literally talking about people who picked up arms against the formal government of the United States of America. And I've never really understood why that isn't a bigger piece of I mean, I do now understand that there is racism and kind of the desperate need of racist white folks to sugarcoat, whitewash, whatever you want to call it, like that part of history, and try to wrap it up in, heritage, when actually all
Hmm.
that means is we're worshiping the statues of the traders who thought that slavery was so important that it was worth breaking away from the rest of the United States.
It's kind of we it's a memory hole kind of thing, right? Where it's certainly whitewashed. One of the things that really, and I have, we were talking earlier, I have written about, not specifically about reparations, but over the years, different aspects of slavery, and like the Freedmen's Bank, or Freedmen's Savings Bank, is, I guess, the technical term, which a lot of people don't know about. And there have been so many instances when you think about, well, why have reparations? Um, I sort of come at it from the economic um, point of view, and a lot of people, I don't think a lot of people, because we don't spend a lot of time talking about it in school, so a lot of people don't really understand that slavery was the business plan of this country. It was the organizing principle. Okay. And as far as I'm aware, America is the only country that literally built and grew itself to a global power based on the free labor of enslaved humans. So when you think about slavery, just one quick stat. By the mid 1800s, okay, so slavery had been going on, we're talking, 1690 on up.
Right. Yep.
By the mid 1800s, the most valuable asset that this country had was enslaved Black people. More than all the factories, all the railroads combined. And in those dollars, we're talking about $3 billion was the value of enslaved Africans. If you adjust for inflation and think about it in today's dollars, that's $100 trillion.
Jesus.
So, and the other part, and I'll let you jump in. The other part of it is we think about, oh, that was, the South. And I hear people like, you hear Jillian Michaels back on, a couple of months ago, she's on CNN. Oh, that many people didn't really have slaves. Well, if you count the North, well, yeah, but I think it's something like 15 or 20% of the people in the South owned slaves in some fashion, or they were somehow connected to the business. But that doesn't mean the North didn't benefit, because,
Yep.
dude, you had slavery backed bonds Just like I used to sell mortgage-backed securities, where the collateral was somebody's house.
Right.
So you had
An
bonds.
asset is an asset.
Well, we're talking about chattel slavery, and that's so unique because slavery's been around for centuries. Back.
Yeah.
I mean, read the Bible. You're talking about the Egyptians enslaving the Jews, right, or
Yeah.
the children of Israel. But there had never been a situation, where enslavement was based on race, nor had there been a situation where if you were a slave, so were all your children and their children's, where it got passed down, hereditarily.
Correct.
And you couldn't buy your way out of it. Of course, in some cases, Black people were able to, went buy their freedom but it wasn't the law. So anyway, man, it's so deep, and I'll just close right here. Today, there's so many vestiges of slavery that folks don't even know. When you talk about no tax on tips, tips started in the medieval era where wealthy people would, give a little bit of a, you know, uh, 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 just to some poor person, they'd flip some money at them, right?
Right. Alms, like a kindness.
Yeah, yeah, a kindness. That's a good way to describe it. But that custom was picked up in America as a way not to pay newly freed Black folks, because the whole idea of paying a Black person a wage was just so antithetical, right? There's that. Right to work laws. The first right to work laws were all former Confederate states.
Yeah.
They were that was where all that started. Again, it's all about keeping those wages as close to free as possible. So it's we can try to ignore it. Folks can try not to talk about it, but it is so woven into the fabric of America. You can't hide.
Right. Right. And things like, police force, right? The fact that police enforcement in many ways, at least in the ways that we kind of conceptualize it now, was in part about rounding up
Oh yeah,
enslaved people,
yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
and returning the asset back to the owner. And I mean, so I want to jump back. You started at 1690. We all kind of we know about the 1690 project and sort of the
1619.
1619. Sorry, yeah. The Hannah Nicole Jones and just the absolute uproar that
Oh
that
yeah.
occurred when she had the audacity to posit that 1619 is in fact when America was founded, and the founding event was the importation of the first enslaved people, right?
Hmm.
And talking about history in that frame and from that lens. And when we talk about, I'm love to talk about the Constitution and how the Constitution is the founding document of this country. And when you look at our history, the only way the Constitution was adopted was because it was full of compromises to the southern states, so that they would join the Union. And all of
Right.
those compromises, all of them, were entirely about keeping slavery intact for southern states. So, even our founding document, not just the Three-Fifths Clause, but the structure of the Electoral College and the structure of the Senate and all of these things baked into our Constitution were put there in part so that the northern states could entice the southern states to join the Union. So you're right. Like slavery is baked in. The enslavement of people was baked into the very founding and nature of this country.
You know, back during COVID, my my family, it was, Father's Day. And for Father's Day, I got a subscription to Ancestry with, all of it, the DNA, the enhanced search. So you could just fall into which I did, was just fall into a rabbit hole. And my wife, who happens to be white, it took like 5 minutes to just, you just plug in a couple of names and boom, 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 boom. It was so easy to go almost back to, the Mayflower practically, right? Um, on my side of the family, it was a little more difficult, but I was surprised that I was able to trace on my grandfather's side of the family all the way back to the late 1700s, because that's what's so interesting about slavery. They kept really good records. so and I didn't realize this, but I use census records to sort of, work my way back. And when you get back to, pre-Civil War, so, pre-1865, the census records have like, columns for slaves. And I was able to go back to the late 1700s, of all places, North Carolina, which is where I live.
Right.
And the oldest, or, ancestor that I was able to, work back to was um, in his 70s, as best as I could tell, in 1790 something. Um, had the same last name as my grandfather, and Saul Muldrow. And he had, oh man, like 12 or 15 kids, which makes sense for the time, that we're talking about. I was able to track one of those kids, a daughter, all the way across the United States to Oklahoma territory. It wasn't even a state yet. So why Oklahoma? So essentially, it was the Trail of Tears. She ends up in Oklahoma, owned by the Cherokee Nation.
Wow.
Why? Because, see, keep in mind, Africans weren't the first shot. Remember, Christopher Columbus came over, and you can look at, he was talking about, oh, these people are really nice and docile. They make great slaves. So they tried it with other cultures, but indigenous people, disease, and so forth, almost wiped out complete, tribes and so on. Um, the Cherokee, you had what were called the five civilized tribes. And I won't try to recite them, but the familiar names. I want to say Choctaw, Cherokee. I'm sure we can post it. I wrote about it, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and they were trying to assimilate because they had been told, you got to adopt European culture, and part of that is you got to own slaves too.
Yeah.
And so you had plantations that were owned by indigenous Americans, who, by the way, were barely even indigenous at that point. Like in my story, the people we're talking about were predominantly Scottish, really didn't even, blue-eyed. The father of the Cherokee Nation was a blue-eyed mixed race Scottish and Cherokee guy.
Yeah.
So from there, this one woman works her way down to Arkansas. And as I told you earlier, there were two parts that just really kind of knocked me off my feet. The first part was the way that I was able to pinpoint where she was a census filed by the Cherokee Nation. And there's this column, and it's got, for enslaved people. And then there's another column for runaways.
Oof.
And there's another column for, I forget the terminology that they use, but it's essentially slaves that have lost their mind, like they're retarded, as they would put it.
Yeah.
And she ends up in Arkansas. And sure enough, I ran across a document, which I still have it, from under the Homestead Act, where my great 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 grandfather received 40 acres in Hampstead, Arkansas.
Wow.
How crazy is that? So I guess he got his 40 acres. I don't know if he got the mule.
Right, right. He got the 40 acres, but maybe not the mule. Man, that is an incredible story, Marlon. Thank you for sharing it. It really, I mean, I think it for me it connects so personally. Like you're a person that I have become friends with and care about, and to be able to trace, through your lineage, kind of a direct connection to the suffering that existed for centuries in this country. But it just breaks my heart all over again. And part of the reason that I want to have this conversation. And by the way, I should acknowledge, like, uh, obviously, reparations for Indigenous people is an important topic as well. And I am not, I'm, am not as, I mean, I don't want to say I'm learned on reparations at all, but I'm not as learned on like reparations for Indigenous
Hmm.
tribes. So I thought, today we would focus kind of on addressing reparations for the descendants of enslaved people.
Well, that's the thing. Part of the, if you want to sort of say, well, what validates reparations for Black folks is the fact that the government's paid reparations for interred Japanese citizens.
Yeah.
We have even paid into, I guess, funds that gave reparations to Holocaust survivors. That's not even in America. And to some extent, there have been some reparations for indigenous Americans, and I think it's mostly in the form of land. But one of the things in that story that I was referencing, we just made and broke so many contracts with Native Americans. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
So but that does at least, so to think that, oh, the whole idea of reparations is out of the question. It's not like we haven't done it before.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's important to, you know, from what I have come across in my life so far, kind of wanting to try to talk about this issue, people's minds break at the magnitude of the damages owed, right? So if you look at the wealth gap right now between white Americans and black Americans, it's something like $16 trillion. And
Yeah.
and I
Well, that's
think,
just because we're lazy, man. We just don't pull ourselves up by our bootstraps,
uh-huh,
right?
that that's got to be it. That's got to
That's
be,
it.
yeah, there you go. You, and when you talk about an amount of money that large, right? I think people's brains, you're a finance guy, you know this. I'm sure, anything that starts with a T, people's brains start to break. And so a lot of the objections that come up to the topic of reparations usually tend to be about logistics. Like,
Hmm.
how would you do it? How would you, correctly identify people? Would it be cash payments or assets or whatever? But the place that I want to start the conversation, or the place that I want to put as kind of foundational is, but is it the right thing to do? Yes. Like, was there an injustice? Absolutely. Is making the injustice, even if we can't make the injustice right, could we try to make it better? We could. We could try. And any objection, I think, that comes from a place of logistics or it's too much money or whatever, I always want to ground it in, but is it the right thing to do? And should we at least fucking try? And, that's kind of where I start from, right?
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear what you think.
America spends money on anything it wants to. We've been to the fucking moon, dude.
Mhm.
Come on. So, there are a lot of ways you could do it. And so, you start off, okay, who qualifies? I guess the simplest, and this is just me, I'm not an expert on this. I just read a lot and I've been Black all my life. So, um, s- so you could start with anybody who has at least an ancestor that was enslaved. So, like my story, I got a lot of them. I can trace and it's not me just reciting a story somebody told me. The DNA tells me where my people came from. So I sent my DNA in to Ancestry, and it was like it took me a minute to, but I figured in the end of it, if folks are wanting to track me, they're probably already doing it anyway somehow, right?
Yeah.
So I sent my stuff in, and um, it was very interesting. I had Scottish DNA, which kind of tracks with the whole, story that I just told.
Right.
Um, but then, sprinkled mostly West Africa, and then a few other places that you just was really like, where'd that come from? I had as much Scottish DNA as I did Nigerian.
Wow.
Ain't that crazy? So you could start there, and then, how do you pay for it? I don't know. It could be land grants. It could be, um, look at the big, beautiful bill, dude. We just ran up a $5 trillion deficit just to pay 1% of the population.
Right.
So the whole idea that, oh, it's too expensive, I just know that's a red herring to me. And the other things you hear is, well, my family didn't own slaves, so but your family. I'll tell you what, your family benefited. I don't care who you are, if you're white and have been in this country for any length of time, generationally. Um, Slavery paid for the infrastructure of America.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's honestly, man, it shocks me just when you start thinking about, what that meant. So at the time, cotton was the world's biggest. The United States was like the king of cotton.
Yeah.
That was the biggest export. That drove Wall Street. That's what built Wall Street. Investment bankers doing business with plantation owners, right?
Yep.
Like I said earlier, bonds backed by slavery. Essentially, think about it like farmers now with cattle. That is what my people were considered.
Sure.
The same thing as a cow or a horse, and those things you can borrow against. I mean, I'm trying to think. I saw something the other day. I think it was the Hartford. You could take out insurance on your slaves, right? So it's so freaking deep, man.
It really is. And I agree with you. Like this country can pay for whatever it deems is important enough to pay for, whether that was going to the moon or paying for wars or, you know, tax cuts for billionaires. And I think that um, we have to address this and address the injustices in our past because they're woven so deeply into the fabric of this country. So I want to, if we could talk for a minute about 40 acres and a mule, right? Like, so you kind of
Mm.
talked about how your grandfather actually did get 40 acres. Do we know if that was kind of as a result of Sherman's Field Order 15 or
I I don't know. I mean, I have to go back and look at the document, but it was a certificate that was signed by I want to say it was Ulysses S. Grant. I
uh,
haven't looked at it in a while, but I mean, it's, got the flowery cursive writing and all of this stuff, and it's kind of hard to read, but I mean, it's got the exact date. I want to say it was 1867 or 68. I'll post it when we're done, but it's freaky
yeah,
to see where it says down at the bottom that this guy, Thomas Muldrow, I guess, is gonna get 40 acres, and they lay out exactly, longitudinally where it is,
yep,
and it's in Arkansas. And to this day, my family, like our homestead, is in that area of Arkansas. It's not 40 acres anymore, I don't think.
right.
But I got family in what's the area today is Prescott, Arkansas. And it's, rural as can be. And they've been there. I used to go there and pick peas when I was a kid. It was like a big trip, which is another thing. I tell people, dude, I grew up during Jim Crow. This is not like far away history.
Yeah.
I was reading as I was preparing for this, and this was something I didn't know, that there were people in Congress in the 20th century that had owned slaves. That's crazy. In like the 1920s,
I
there
guess
was
that
some
makes sense.
guy, and I think he served 5 or 6 years in the House or something in the early 20s, and his family had owned slaves. So it's not ancient history. Um, so when you talk about the 40 acres and a mule, and think about this when we talk about who's gotten reparations, the former slaveholders got reparations for their loss of property.
Right.
Okay. So, I don't know if that answers your question, man, but
I mean, like it's a place to start, right? And I guess like the thing that keeps coming back to me with 40 Acres and a Mule, and so that comes from General Sherman's
Mhm.
Special Field Order 15, which was then quickly rescinded by Congress, and kind of like all of Reconstruction was basically shut down in favor of the white supremacists. Um, but the thing that really strikes me about it is, even if it had been, we've got folks in the chat who are saying, yeah, but it was going to be the shittiest land and hilly and barren and whatever. No,
Okay.
it would have been
It would have been
land.
something.
It would have been land.
Can I tell
Right.
you something about the shitty land thing? Okay, there's a story, and I have, you get so many things in your drafts, you just never get around to writing about it. There was in Oklahoma, indigenous people were given land grants, and the freedmen, which were the people, the descendants of the people they had enslaved. There was a woman named Sarah Rector, 11 years old. So everybody got a little parcel of land. And you're right, it was the shittiest land. But Sarah Rector's family, that land, keep in mind, we're talking about Oklahoma,
Hmm.
oil.
Oil.
So if you've seen that movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, I think
Yep.
was the name.
Yep.
So it's that whole situation. That oil made, it was the Osage tribe, I think, in that story, just wealthy as shit. This 11-year-old girl, her little parcel of land that was rocky and all crappy, turns out there was oil on it. Her father negotiates and sells a lease, or, negotiates a lease to Standard Oil. This 11-year-old girl becomes the wealthiest Black person in America for a period of time. So the crazy part about it, it becomes not, global knowledge that there's this little Black girl in Oklahoma that is fucking rich. She starts getting marriage offers from all overseas, dudes trying to get at that money, just like in the movie, right?
Hmm.
The Defender, which was a Black newspaper, I think in Detroit, if my memory serves, they basically say we gotta come down here and look out for this kid and see what's going on, because they're gonna take him to the cleaners. She makes so much money that this is crazy. The legislature in Oklahoma basically votes to make her a white person, an honorary white, because she couldn't ride on trains, she couldn't do,
Right.
but she has all this money,
Right.
right? And people are like, well, we want her to be able to spend money with us, but she's Black, so we're going to make her white.
Right.
And there,
Well,
I have
probably an
newspaper
honorary
clippings,
man
dude.
too,
It's
right?
the freaking
Because
stupidest story you ever want to hear. And here's what's so bad about it. There's a movie about to come out, I don't know, next month or so, about this young lady. And it is so whitewashed. It is produced by this Christian film company.
oh God.
They've literally created a white savior. They've got this kid negotiating oil deals with some white guy. That's not how it worked,
Right.
you
Right.
know, and it's just, I've watched the trailer and it just breaks my freaking heart. They brought Jesus all into it, and she's praying for this and that, and it's just like, come on, really? So yeah, it's something else, man. They lit. It's like in what was it, Hidden Figures, where they created a just a white man in the form of Kevin Costner out of whole cloth,
Right.
to sort of guide these ignorant black folks around. Same thing, man. Same thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of laughing. They had to make her an honorary white person. They also had to make her an honorary man, right? So that she could own probably own things.
Well, the way
And
it normally worked, and the way it worked in her case, is that, and this is just like in Killers of the Flower Moon. The whole idea was, oh well, these people, yeah, they've got all this money, but they just don't have the facilities mentally to handle being rich, and so they would have a guardian white person, usually a man, always a man, that managed their money and probably stole from them,
right, I'm sure
you know.
skimmed a certain
But this
percentage off.
woman was able to hang on to quite a bit of her money, and what ultimately, the ultimate thing was when, depression, and a lot of, oil prices fell through the floor, but she kept a lot of her money for years, and into adulthood, married a guy, I want to say from Missouri or somewhere, and I think lived in Missouri, in Kansas City, I think. I believe the mansion that she had is still around, I think. But yeah, it's a crazy story.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because people in the chat are talking about, it's kind of more proof that whiteness is a social construct. And I'm so
Oh,
Karen
sure.
Dia, who we had on the show a month ago, is teaching a class. She had a class that she taught at Columbia about race in the media, and she's teaching it kind of in an online form. And I'm taking the class, and it's fantastic, by the way. Next time Karen Atia offers her race in the media class, everyone should go take it. It is fucking fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she talks about race as a social construct and how during the founding of the League of Nations, the Japanese came to the Western countries who were the leaders in the League of Nations and essentially asked to be included in like the construct of like whiteness, empire, because the Japanese had conquered the Russians, had beat the Russians in the
Mm-hmm.
Russo-Japanese War.
Okay.
They were like, well, okay, so we bested these white people in Russia.
Doesn't that make us white?
We must be white, right? Like we're the special people of Asia. Like we're the elite race of Asia. We must be white. And they were shockingly flatly rejected from the Western countries at the League of Nations. And there's a direct line from that rejection to the Second World War and the rise of Japanese like hegemony and imperialism,
Mm-hmm.
and the Second World War, and kind of further into how race is essentially a social construct, and who has been included in whiteness and excluded from whiteness has changed massively over time. And so,
I'll tell you a funny story, man. Um, so this investment firm that I worked at in Arkansas, I worked there for 10 years. When they hired me in 1983, I was the first black professional to work on the trading floor. Um, there was a woman that worked there, clearly Latina, almost dark as me. I mean, I don't know if she was Mexican. Her last name was Hispanic. She was a white woman, as far as she was concerned. There was a kid in my neighborhood growing up. Um, his last name was Sanchez. He was a white kid, right? Everybody in his family, they had totally assimilated, did not want to be considered anything but white folks. It's just crazy. I had and I was on a call or a live stream a couple of weeks ago, and with Sherry Dunn. I don't know if you know Sherry. He was, very a smart woman. You should check her out. Um, former traditional journalist, and now has a great book out called Qualified. But she talks and writes about all this stuff, and she was talking about how for the longest time Italians were considered black. You know, but everybody figures out when they come to America. Everybody figures out what time it is, and we're the sort of the springboard everybody bounces off of. I used to in New York, man. We're talking about in recent times. I would be on the bus, and I lived in a neighborhood. I lived in New Jersey at the time of this story, and so I would take the bus into the Port Authority every morning. And the neighborhood that I lived in was predominantly Asian, and Asian folks wouldn't sit next to me. It was crazy, dude. I vividly remember this. And a pregnant Asian woman, the bus is crowded, everybody's standing, and my seat is, I got a bag in my seat and I move it because it's a pregnant lady, right? And I can see her just sort of look at her husband like that. Like, is it okay for me to sit right here? And he just sort of, no. And she stood for an hour. You
Hey,
know,
Marlon, she didn't want her baby to catch the black.
the baby might have called black, Oh my God. It's so stupid though when you think about it, man. This the whole idea. But it's where we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know. I know, man. We just gotta just let that one simmer for a minute.
It seriously, it melts my brain. It melts my brain. And so if we were going to try to do it, right? Like if let's imagine that we lived in a better
Mhm.
world where we could have a political conversation about reparations for the descendants of enslaved black people. What do you think, as a finance guy, because, your training, your career and everything is, dealing with big dollar signs,
Big
right?
numbers.
Big numbers. Like, what do you think would be a practical way to, if you're thinking about kind of the racial wealth gap,
Hmm.
the fact that, those 40 acres and a mule, had they been granted, uh, that would have been the basis for generational wealth for many, many black
Sure.
families. How do you like what could we do as a people, as a nation that would
I have to say, I just don't think it's nearly as hard as everybody's trying to make it. Honestly, the government could set up a trust fund. There could be housing grants. There could be, um, you could issue bonds. I mean, there're just a lot of things that could be done. It's just not that hard, really. I just don't think it is. Land grants. You've heard of baby bonds or, trust bonds. I actually took some notes. That's what I'm looking at. I mean, there are just so many different ways. Grants, educational grants, right? I mean, there's just a number of ways you could do it. And the money's there. Look what we spend. You can what's the saying? You can tell a nation's values by, how it treats it's the least of the people, right? And
yeah,
you can also tell by how it spends its money. What are we spending our money on? War.
war and
Look, dude, we
billionaires?
just gave $40 billion to Argentina. 40 billion.
Yep.
I mean, and the way the market is behaving, we're probably gonna have to give them some more money. So I just do not buy into the notion that, oh boy, this is too hard. How are we gonna figure this out? We do what we want to do, man. When America decides it wants to do something, it fucking does it.
Right. Right.
And so it's just not hard, man. It's really not. And I, someone just said that they're tired of the money we spend on defense. I'll tell you a story, and well, it's not even a story. One of my favorite responses to that argument that we just don't have the money. um, I think this was when Obama was president. The Pentagon did a study, just trying to figure out where all their money was going. And it turned out they had lost. They had no accounting for about $250 billion. And they killed the report. Yeah. So they got so much money, they don't even know how much money they have. Okay, 250 billion, that would go a long way.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about the lost wages, now we're talking trillions. Like I said, just the value of enslaved people in today's dollars was 100 trillion.
Yeah.
So, I just don't buy the argument because we figure out how to do big, beautiful bullshit bills
Yeah.
and all this stuff. So at the end of the day, when a country prints its own money, it can do whatever it wants to do.
Yeah. So I love that. As I was doing my research, I came across this really fun factoid, which is, we talked earlier about how the wealth gap between uh, Black Americans and white Americans is about $16 trillion. And if we were to invest, take that amount of money and invest it into Black Americans and Black families, uh, the estimation is the the economic upside that it would generate, the benefit to the economy that it would generate, about $16 trillion. So in other words, it would pay for
Oh, it would
itself.
boost the economy because you're literally putting look at what during COVID the CARES Act, I guess, was the stimulus money
Right.
literally brought people out of poverty.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, you're putting money into people's pockets. What are they going to do? They're going to buy things with it. And, I guess sort of in that vein, think about what's going to happen, I guess, Saturday if nothing's done. And this is a little off topic, but not really, I don't
Yeah,
think.
not really.
Food stamps, SNAP benefits. People think that is going to hurt the people, it's going to hurt those people that are getting food stamps. But what happens? You know, a person receives that benefit. Well, they don't put the money in the bank. They go to Walmart and they buy groceries with it. They go to Food Lion, they buy groceries with it. They, spend it on maybe a new pair of shoes for their kid. Well, so come Saturday, if that money doesn't hit, it doesn't just hurt the person who receives it. It doesn't just hurt the recipient. It hurts Walmart. It hurts Food Lion. It hurts the little local place where they might, buy, some item that qualifies. Same thing here, in this conversation. If you're putting that money in the pocket of people as recompense, just as we did for the slaveholders,
Yep.
they're going to buy homes. They're going to, send their kids to school. They're going to buy land, right? So
Yep.
it's actually, and look, not an economist. I'm just a guy that's been around this stuff for a minute. It would certainly stimulate the economy in some fashion. Now, I'm not saying that's the reason to do it. You do it because it's the right freaking thing to do.
Yep. Yeah. I totally agree, man. Like, I come back again and again to is it the right thing to do? Yes. It was a massive injustice, the likes of which we can't truly comprehend.
You
Should
know,
it?
I had not really thought about the wealth gap so much. Just inequality. No, really, until I moved here and started writing about it. But one of the things that just sort of in my day to day that just really brings it home. So I live on an island in North Carolina. There are most of the people I know here, not wealthy people at all, in terms of having jobs that pay a lot of money. Mm. But it is, and they live in these beautiful homes, on the water and all this stuff. It is unbelievable how many times I'm talking to someone and they are living in a house that granddad bought in the 50s and mom inherited, and now it's been passed down and passed down. I was talking to a guy one time, and this just really blew me away. This guy couldn't even drive his car. He had so many DWIs. They had one of those things you got to blow into it before your car will start. And he's sitting up. His kid and my kid were friends, so he's sitting on my deck and he's talking. And his parents live on in a mobile home on a corner lot on this island. And he was just talking about, yeah, when they die, me and my brothers are going to get that land. This was 4 or 5 years ago. Land's worth over $1 million. Since COVID, that's what's run real estate up here is all the sons of people, sons and daughters of people who have owned land on this island for generations,
Generations.
right? So we're talking about generational wealth.
Yep.
And, you know, well, we don't have that. I mean, some black people do, certainly. And in fact, there is a section of this island that's on the National Registry. It's I'm gonna take a photo. It's about, I don't know, a few blocks on this island, and it's when black people couldn't go to the beaches that white folks went to. There's a section of this island called Ocean City, and it's black owned. Pretty much. Now, a lot of black folks have sold out and moved on, but there back in the day was a hotel on the island. It's not here. I think it got blown away by a hurricane years ago. Um, so yeah, it's not all bad, but man, I see those stories or hear those stories over and over where, I mean, and people who are friends of mine, where, they've inherited a house that was bought 40, 50 years ago, GI Bill, all this stuff that we
Yep.
just we couldn't avail ourselves of.
Yeah. As we're kind of getting to the top of the hour, and I
Wow, it goes
feel
fast.
it goes fast, man. I feel like we could talk about this for ages, and we probably should talk about it again because I want it to be a thing that gets into the conversation. And I hope other folks who are listening will have shows or write articles about why this is the right thing to do and the right thing to address. And I kind of wanted to like wrap us up on some positives, which is um, we know that the conversation is the right thing to do and that people are actually doing it because it is happening. So I've got a
Yeah.
couple examples of places where so Evanston, Illinois, I'm going to be reading this, so I'm looking off. So in 2019, Evanston, Illinois became the first U.S. city to enact a reparations plan. They did a community driven study of housing segregation in the 20th century in their city. And so they passed this bill. And in 2021, they created the Restorative Housing Program, which grants up to $25,000 to eligible Black residents, which is anyone who lived in Evanston from 1919 to 1969 and their descendants. And that 25 grand goes towards mortgage and housing costs. And it's funded by a real estate transfer tax and cannabis sales.
Okay.
And California in 2020, Assembly Bill 3121 created a task force on reparations to study slavery's legacy. And in 2023, the task force released a report documenting how slavery and systemic racism cemented structural inequality in California. And they've come up with 115 policy regulations. Unfortunately, didn't have time to figure out how many of those have been implemented yet. But I do know out of LA, there's a story about kind of like what you were just talking about, Marlon, the folks whose ancestors had kind of owned a piece of the beach. Uh, in LA, there is this famous section of the beach. I think it's Manhattan Beach, but I could be wrong. That was owned by a Black family who set up a beachside resort, and it was in the kind of Green Book days. It was a safe place where Black families could go to the beach. And their land was taken through an eminent domain
Oh yeah, I remember that. I remember
movement
reading about that.
from
That
the
was
cities, and they filed a lawsuit. This is years, generations it's
yes.
taken, but they filed a lawsuit and they won. And so that incredibly valuable stretch of beachside property has been given back to this family.
Hmm.
And I don't know if we know what they're going to do with it yet, but like reparations movements are happening in this country, and I think it's up to all of us to have the conversation. And I would say, white people, it is especially up to us to have these conversations and make sure that we are, you know, allies in the movement for justice, because it, we cannot heal as a country. We cannot get past the bullshit that we are in now if we aren't having hard conversations about hard topics like this. And I was going to be hyperbolic and say there's never been a greatest injustice in the history of the world. You know, I don't
It's
want
right
to,
up there, man.
but it's
It's
got
up
to be
there.
right the fuck up there. Yeah. So I'm sorry. I just totally soapboxed and monologued, Marlon.
No, dude, it's your show. I'm just a guest.
Well, I'd love to hear what you think, though. Like, what
I'm
are your
I'm
kind
with
of
you. I
closing
mean,
thoughts for people?
I just look at look at Germany as an example. If you want to say, oh, it's just going to divide us even more. I mean, look at Germany, look at South Africa. These are America. We're singularly, we've got these concepts. It's like this topic. It's like guns. We don't want to recognize that we're doing some shit that's really unique in how poorly we're handling it, right? Um, so, truth and reconciliation is a good thing.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be easy. But part of, I think, the problem that we have as a country is how poorly educated people are on the real history. I can just remember when I took history, the Reconstruction was like a couple of paragraphs,
Right.
and you just move on to the next thing. And so we've done a really good job of minimalizing how this country became what it is. And we want to think that it was, these hardworking, you know, uh, rugged individualists that just did all this stuff. And it's kind of ugly and it's kind of nasty. But the sooner that we sort of embrace that history and look at where we are now, I mean, even now, as bad as it is, fuck, it's progress from where we started. Right. So, yeah, it's tough, but like I said, it ain't supposed to be easy.
Yeah. I I love the idea of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and let's face it, we're going to need one for this catastrophe, the Trump
Dude,
catastrophe.
especially, especially the truth part.
Yeah,
Because, man, these are some of the lyingest folks I've ever seen in my life.
yeah, yeah, and it's interesting, right? When I think about it, I'm like, if we have a Truth and Reconciliation, when we have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to kind of dig into the depths of what the Trump team has done, we know it's going to be rooted in racism. We know that it's going to be rooted in white supremacy, right? And this patriarchal, hierarchical thing that they're
Hmm.
trying to establish. We should just fucking keep going.
Well, I mean, it'd be a really good time to just go ahead and add reparations into that
I,
equation,
I I'm saying, right?
right? I mean, because we got to have truth and reconciliation and some Nuremberg trials and and every other thing. So
Yeah. Yep.
hopefully we'll get there. Fingers
I
crossed.
hope so. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Marlon, I'm so grateful to you for being willing to come on the show and have this conversation. Uh, I know that it's a hard topic to talk about, right? And
Yeah.
I appreciate you doing it, because
I mean, look. I mean, if we can't have this conversation, how can we expect other folks to do it?
right.
Right. I appreciate you inviting me to do it because it's something I have, like I said, I've written about it around the edges, but not specific to reparations. So, I at first was a little hesitant, and then I said, well, damn, if I'm, what if I'm not willing to talk about this, how can I expect other people to do it? And then I had to study up
Yeah.
because I told my wife I can't get on here and mess up on reparations of all things.
Well, and I appreciate you, man, because when I suggested the idea, I was like, I really want to talk about this. And there is a big piece of me that, I'm like, but can I, like, as a white dude, can I speak eloquently about this? And let me,
You've done great, man, and that's the thing. I mean, white folks are the ones who need to talk about this the most.
I agree.
And so, this is a start. We've done our little part.
Yeah.
Somebody asked in the chat, I thought I saw, I'm actually going to be back on here with you in a couple of days. You
You're
and
going to be on for Fucked Up
so,
Friday.
yeah, I'm doing double duty, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we've had repeat guests before, but never twice in the same week. And
I know,
if
man.
there,
This is
if there's a
crazy.
better person
I've
to
never
do it,
done it either. So,
yeah. Yeah. There's nobody better, nobody more that Dana and I would love to have on twice in 1 week. And you're going to be here for Fucked Up Friday. So
I mean, fucked up
we're going to have
Friday and Halloween. I
and
had to do
Halloween.
it, man.
Yeah. All right, my friend. Well, thank you so much for stepping in for Dana today. And thank you for having this conversation. It was a real honor to be able to do this with you. And thanks everybody for being here.
My pleasure. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, everybody. Take
Thanks,
care. Love
folks.
you, Dana.
Take care.
Bye. Bye.